This is The Creative, a podcast of authentic discussion with industry pros.
Yeah, so my name's Caegan Meagher. I'm a motion graphic artist, I suppose, among other things. Kind of had like a storied mixed career doing 2D, 3D animation. That's sort of evolved over time, now focusing a lot more on production for like live concert visuals and also VJing and touring production.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mixed bag of things. I've kind of worn a lot of hats over the years, so...
Did you come to that kind of organically? Like, is this just like different things that you've been super interested in over the years, just kind of bundled together, or was this like a really aimed for career path?
It's kind of a weird one because I definitely had sort of an objective in mind there, but no real like goal for getting there. I've never been a very goal-oriented person, so it's kind of a weird thing to like describe in that way. I guess I had inspiration maybe like a decade back where I saw some things that people were doing with like projection mapping and things like that, and I just was immediately just like enamored, like how the hell this is like magic, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
okay.
I want to know how this magic works. But I didn't have any of the know-how, and it was like a solid 10 years before it was like, okay, I finally understand everything I need to know to like actually make this happen, which included learning 3D programs and a bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
So there wasn't like a fixed plan, but it was just something that sort of naturally progressed, and then just getting lucky meeting the right people along the way.
But this is the outcome of a 10-year journey to get where you are.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a weird way to frame it, but yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
Do you feel good about where you are? Is there still a lot on your bucket list that you want to still knock off?
I mean, I think from here, in terms of like the day-to-day work, I think I'm pretty close to like, this is what I want to be doing. I think now it's more just like being a bit older and realizing that like being in the trenches day in, day out is probably not like a long-term viable thing. In terms of, day-to-day production and things like that. So like long-term, it's more like how can I build a larger business or like a small kind of boutique agency that provides those services, with a team of people. So it's not just one guy kind of like going crazy by himself.
So how did you, so you're talking about growing a small business maybe as an aspiration. So like how did you wind up finding people in the first place that kind of wanted to pay for this? Because I think a lot of times when you're a creative that does a lot of artistic stuff, people want your shit for free. Like, so how did you move away from, kind of that clamoring for free work to, I'm working with like real deal folks?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a combination of like luck and a lot of luck, honestly.
Yeah.
I was doing I've been doing commercial motion graphic work now for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, I'd amassed like a pretty, I don't want to say great portfolio because I don't think I have a very good portfolio. It's pretty disorganized and not up to date. My demo reel is way, way out of date, and I'm shocked anybody will hire me based on it. But I think that, it was a combination of just kind of like getting my creations out on social media. That played a big role. I was really like very quiet and dark about that for a long time, and I still have a lot of trepidation about social media in general. I don't really like engaging with it very much, but I've forced myself to learn that like this is something I really, really need to be doing because I saw very quickly that like in posting things up on there frequently or engaging with people who were like kind of movers and shakers that like they responded to that, in a huge way. And I kind of begrudgingly accepted that fact. I didn't really like that was the reality of things. So it was that combined with just happening to meet like a handful of people who were like established in that realm and kind of like threw me a few chances here and there.
So the space where you make visuals for music, were you a fan of the music beforehand, or is this kind of like, well, I don't really, more hired gun kind of thing?
I mean, mostly it's been hired gun. I mean, I've been fortunate in that I've worked with a couple people who have like definitely made music that I'm into. I mean, I'm not going to speak ill of anybody who employs me or anything like that, but you know what I mean? It's just like, at the end of the day, like it is, like even if you are working for somebody whose music you love, right, you're still being hired to complete a job. And so I don't view it through that filter too much. Some yes, some no. I mean, some it's just like it becomes like almost like listening to like stock music in an edit to me, because after a while you just hear it so many times that it like loses any meaning at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason I ask is like I have friends that have, you know, found a path through making music videos, and for a lot of them it started with, yo, like I just love hip hop. You start engaging with the artists that they love, and it kind of builds up from there.
Yeah.
I mean, but it sounds like more like you knew people kind of on the backside of things. It was like, hey, this is a really great professional relationship. Go talk to somebody.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, and I guess as it ties into your previous question, like, you know, a lot of the acts that I do work with are, you know, in the electronic music space, and that's partially because, like, there's an expectation for production there to be just, like, next level. Like, it's very much so an experiential thing in that way compared to, like, other music genres. I mean, the kind of production that you see there is just, like, kind of unrivaled, in my opinion, barring, like, you know, the U2s and the Madonnas of this world where they go on a world tour and it's just, like, bonkers. But like after that, like, you know, people in the electronic music space are definitely doing the most compelling things technically, I think.
Do you have kind of a favorite moment from those big spectacle spaces that you've been in?
I think more as like an observer than a contributor, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, because some of those stage designs now are so dumb. Like I did a festival at the very end of last year of 2018 in Vancouver called Contact, and like I think their claim, I believe, was that it was like the largest stage design in all of North America.
Okay. So like help me out. Like I'm used to tiny shows, you know, like
I mean, I would struggle to put it into words. Like, I don't know, this is a podcast, so I can't just like attach an image to this. I wish I could. I have a whole bunch on my phone, but I mean,
this many.
Yeah, it's this many. I mean, it was comically large. I mean,
how many people were at the festival, would you guess?
I don't know. It'd be in the thousands. I'd guess 4 to 5.
Okay.
I mean, let's put it this way: there was more stage than there was people, and not in a like low attendance way, but just a like.
It was that big.
It was just that big. It was just like, because it was held in an arena in Vancouver, and like, I mean, it was just dumb. You know, it's just like one of these things where it's just like, this is absolutely insane.
Okay, so let me set you up with a dummy question. This is stuff you like probably are not producing on a laptop. Like, what you know, it took you 10 years to get here. These are giant spectacle spaces. You know, what is your hardware or your software setup like how much is there with that?
Are you talking about in terms of production or like the actual performance end?
No, more on the production, like on the software nerd side of it.
Okay.
Like how much computer power are you having to bring to the table to pull this together?
So like at home, my like office, the primary workstation I'm operating on is like actually it's a little less than ideal at the moment, if I'm going to be honest. But I've got a i7 8700K CPU guy with, I don't remember how much RAM, a lot. 3 GTX 1080s. I've got 2 more render nodes after that have got a whole bunch of video cards, which honestly at this point I'm having a hard time keeping track of how many. One of those is my old workstation, which is like a dual Xeon system, and then I've built another mobile system that's actually another i7 Actually, I switched them out. I've got another workstation that's like a mobile guy that I'm building into a Pelican case for both VJing and rendering. That's got 2 1080s and then a bunch of RAM and stuff. And that's a whole nother project.
Like, for a bunch of RAM, are you over 100 gigs?
My old workstation had 128 gigs.
Yeah, so a bunch of RAM.
A bunch of RAM, yeah. And that's like my old render node. So I mean, like, but ideally I'd be working on all the Xeon stuff on my main build.
And these are PC computers. These are not Hackintosh.
No Macs. I mean, I used to work with Macs for a really long time, and I'm not some like anti-Apple person.
No, it's just building it.
It's just building it, and it's the cost, and it's the performance, and just at this point, quite frankly, like Apple has 0 offerings that will do what I want them to do. And moreover, even if they did, even if they could get close, like the rendering tech that I use now is no longer compatible with modern Apple stuff anyway. So it's like it's not even actually a viable option.
What about Linux? Is Linux something that you consider, or is it? It seems like it's such a hobbyist struggle to bring into the creative spaces.
So, like, I know that there are some performance games to be made there, specifically with, like, the renderer that I use for Cinema 4D, but they don't really translate. I don't think it would translate over in terms of performance, given that I lean on things like Adobe a lot, and there isn't really an answer there.
Yeah.
There isn't really, like, a stable Linux way to make all that happen on the fly.
No, it's funny. I was seeing like a social forum post where like the Adobe thing with Linux seems just like a stupid catch-22 where Adobe says, well, there's no demand, so we don't do it. And then you talk to creatives and they're like, well, the only reason I'm not on Linux is because there's no Adobe software. So it's like there's no way for the two sides to like understand whether or not it's a viable. It just seems like a weird gridlock of.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because Linux seems useful to me, but there's nothing on it.
I mean, I wouldn't say there's nothing, but like there's not. Like any performance gains or like usefulness there to me is negated by the fact that the second I was finished with one task that I could do in Linux, I'd have to switch to Windows to finish it, and that just seems like a giant pain in the ass.
Yeah, it does.
Like I'm not interested in doing that over and over again.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're working a lot in Cinema 4D and the Adobe Creative Suite.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that where you're spending most of your time? How big of a reach in the software landscape do you have to get?
Yeah, I mean, I open Photoshop and After Effects every day for sure, even if it's for the most basic stuff. But Cinema, Octane for rendering, ZBrush, 3D Coat. I've been fiddling with 3ds Max a little bit more as of late, mostly because the UV tools in Cinema are just trash in my opinion, and I can't be bothered to try and figure out how to make them work for me. And I've discovered that 3ds Max actually has okay tools in that space. What else? It's like trying to think. I'm imagining my little taskbar at the bottom of my computer right now, thinking about that. I'd say those would be the big ones. At least in terms of like production. I've definitely made a big swap towards Notch as of late for real-time production work.
Okay.
Which has been really, really cool. I don't know, for those unfamiliar, it's like kind of somewhere between like a game engine and Nuke, I guess.
Okay.
Which is like a weird descriptor, but basically, it's the whole objective of Notch is like render everything in real time.
Okay.
So like really, really high-end productions will use this. And when I say productions in that context, I mean like a touring act or a theatrical company or whatever will use this for video or projections for doing everything in real time, lighting and whatnot. Mm-hmm. It's very much so geared towards being able to talk to other live production software.
Oh, so it will integrate with the actual light setup and the laser part of the show and all of that.
Yeah, like you can basically, there's things like ArtNet and OSC and other protocols that it can communicate with, so you can basically create like a show that fits within that, or D3 Disguise, which is like a media server program.
Yeah, I get like Sound and Light magazine, which is an industry rag on, just like technical setups for shows and stuff, and I look at the pretty pictures. A lot of it is way outside of my element.
I mean, a lot of it,
but it's really impressive stuff.
Yeah,
from what I can puzzle out of it.
I mean, it is really cool, and it's pretty crazy the like leaps and bounds that have happened there. Notch is amazing. I think that translating that to like that highest end production is also extremely expensive. I mean, the licensing for Notch alone is dumb. I mean, but like the things that can be done in it are pretty impressive for sure. I've been learning it more and more, and like the deeper I get into it, I'm just like, God, this is like kind of a dream come true. I do wish it was more on like the radar of more kind of like traditional motion graphics people though, because it is surprisingly usable and really fast, and I feel like it could have more of a reach outside of just live production stuff. It's not cheap, but I think it's worth it in that way.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
So, okay, kind of circling around the different things that you do. When you work on one of these live productions, is that it when when that starts, is somebody just contacting you going, yo, I love what you're already doing, just make me something amazing? Do people come to you with concepts already in mind? How does that like idea generation and creativity part of it kind of shake out?
It's all over the map. Sometimes it's like we have like a really established brand with a really specific idea, and like, can you kind of just help us like elaborate upon this? So like I was working with an actor recently who kind of hit me up saying like, you know, we're doing a rebrand, or not a rebrand, but they kind of have like a new look that was all very like kind of like Japanese anime inspired stuff. They're like, you know, we really want you to kind of like look at these references and just sort of like build upon this, which is cool. I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to do that. That's a neat approach. Sometimes it's just like complete blank slate. Like we really don't have a good point of reference at all.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other things that are really cool to kind of explore. How's your work-life balance? Do you feel like you're kind of in a comfortable space with things? You know, I was talking with in the last episode, I was talking with my friend Dane, and he works 60-hour work weeks doing reality TV, and he still feels like he's got a really solid balance for the way he lives his life. Surprised me a little bit, but he seems really happy, so, you know, no judgment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's terrible right now. I think it's been terrible in the past a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be the first to admit that, like, that can get beyond crazy sometimes.
And you're primarily a contractor, right?
Yeah, I haven't been fully employed by anybody in 3 or 4 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the last time I had like a full-time, like normal 9-to-5 job. But I definitely work. I couldn't tell you on average how many hours a week I normally work, but it's definitely way more than a 9-to-5. That's for sure.
Do you get out enough, or do you find yourself mostly at the desk in the household, or like do you work at a co-working space?
I work at home mostly by choice. I am like really specific about my work environment, and I really struggle with distractions and things like that. Mm-hmm. I also maintain pretty strange hours sometimes, so it's really like, I don't know, I'm cursed with this brain that around 10 o'clock is all of a sudden like, let's be the most creative and productive we can be, even though we've been up since, 7 o'clock this morning or whatever, which is a little bit frustrating, but, I live with it. I make it work, which isn't really compatible with like a co-working space or something like that. Or maybe it is. I don't honestly know how most of them work if they're 24 hours, but I do make it a point to like set aside things on the calendar week to like, you have to go do stuff.
You have to dole around and
you need to go.
Get out of the cave.
You need to go hang out with friends. You need to do this. You need that. Like you got to go. I mean, honestly, even if it's just like errands, like you have a place to be, because otherwise, like, yeah, it's not even like, sometimes it's not even about like there's a deadline or something. It's just like I know I'll get excited about something, and I'll just get lost in that. Like whatever that thing is, that'll just pop up organically. It'll be like, oh, this new thing, like whatever. Like I don't even know. Like sometimes it'll be just completely off the wall, where it's like, oh, I can link this one tool to this other one in this really weird way that I never thought about, and next thing I know, I look at my clock and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. It's just like, how did I do that? You know what I mean? Like, and that happens all the damn time. Like, I hate to admit how often that happens, but it's just like, whatever way my brain is wired, it's definitely just like super curious about learning things and seeing them through to completion, sometimes to unhealthy, measures.
Well, it seems like that curiosity for the technical really is important, though, with the type of work that you're doing. Like, it seems to be kind of hand in hand with the passion.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I don't want to sound like I don't want to put myself on some sort of like podium right now or some pedestal, because I'm not. Like, I'd like to think I'm fairly modest. Man, but if there's like one thing that like drives me kind of nuts sometimes about people in kind of like creative space in general is like a lack of interest there. Mm-hmm. I sometimes get a little bit frustrated when like I hear about people. I'm like, well, why don't I have like a cool opportunity to do X, Y, and Z? And then you float like, I don't know, have you explored this, or have you tried this tool, or have you looked at, I don't don't know, building your own PC or just like learning more about the nuts and bolts, like, because at the end of the day, like, you can be the most creative person in the world, and that's great, but like, we rely on computers and technology to make that happen. And if you don't know how any of it works, or you don't have an interest in like diversifying those that sort of like tub of talent or skills or whatever you want to call it, like, you're gonna kind of stagnate pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, and I'm certainly sympathetic to that kind of perspective because I spent several years doing frontline IT when I was in college. Mm-hmm. So having that point in my life be so in the face of troubleshooting technology and then becoming a digital creative, it was like, that was really, really useful in my first years. And I think it really empowered being able to see a broad horizon for how I navigated my own choices. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a really great observation of yours, that when talking with other creatives and they struggle to figure out, well, how do I get from where I am to where I want to be? Sometimes it's taking that detour into the understanding of the technical, because like your worldview is just too narrow to recognize that your choice is just like, if you just shined your little knowledge curiosity light a little bit to the left, you'd see the other half of the pathway.
Yeah, and I don't want to put myself, like, I don't want to say that I have like it figured out or something, because I absolutely don't. And on the flip side of that coin, like, I think that in the more traditional sense of being a creative or an artistic type, like, I think I'm terrible. Like, I can't draw a straight line. Like, if you handed me a pencil right now and you said,
I was going to ask you at some point if you sketch in a notebook for your ideas.
I literally can't.
Oh.
Like, it's physically impossible. Like, it's
I can't draw.
I can't draw. I mean, it's really funny because sometimes people are like, why, like, you're pretty good at what you do, blah blah blah, and they're like, you must be amazing at like painting or something. Like, no, like, painting, actually, I'd say I'm passable. Drawing, I like literally cannot draw a straight line. Like, it's physically impossible for me to do that. But winding back to the like kind of tech tools and creatives conversation, I'm not saying that you have to be some sort of technical wizard to excel, but I do think that there's a real lack of awareness in terms of the era that we live in sometimes. Like, I'm 30 now. When I got started learning like After Effects, I was 15, and I started learning because my school computer lab, for whatever reason, had we had a decent Mac lab, which didn't make any sense because I don't know how they had the money for that, but they somehow did.
Back in the day, Apple was just giving away computer labs to schools.
I mean, I guess so, because like we had like a pretty dope one. I mean, we had a bunch of, I can't remember the model now, but like
maybe like G3s or something.
Probably G3s, yeah. I mean, this is going back so far now that my memory is super fuzzy, but probably G3s. And like we had a bunch of Lightwave installations. We had Final Cut Pro going on.
God, that would have been like Final Cut 6 even. Like
maybe even 5, honestly. Jeez. And then we had Media 100, which most people listening to this probably have no idea what the hell that even is.
That would have been when like Flash was still owned by Macromedia.
Yeah, like we're going back a ways now. But where was I headed with the train of thought? Oh, I was bringing this up because like I started playing with After Effects in high school in the computer lab, and I thought this was just the coolest thing in the world. I mean, I was just making stupid stuff. I mean, it was just like Tim and Eric inspired. Like before, this is predating Tim and Eric also, but like just really silly animations, like where I'd take some tutorial content and like cut it up in a different way that it wasn't supposed to, but I just thought it was, hilarious. It probably wasn't funny, and I'm sure if I saw it now I would cringe, but that was my introduction to the job path that I ultimately took. Yeah. Weird how that plays out. But when I wanted to kind of learn more organically, I went to my mom and I just like begged her. We were in Tower Books down the street from my house, and I found a book on like the official Adobe introduction to.
Could I get another beer? Sure. Yeah. Do you want another beer?
I'm good. The official introduction to After Effects or whatever the case might be, and I begged her to buy it because I was broke in 14 or 15, and like it was a big deal. It was like, oh, you're buying a book to learn this stupid animation program.
Yeah.
And in Generation YouTube, that doesn't really fly. Like you look at what like kids are making, and this is a really long rambling point, but what I'm trying to get at is kids growing up right now with access to the internet learn things in a very different way from, say people yourself or my own age.
Right.
Information is so much more readily available. And so when they set out to learn something, they have like this infinite level of resources immediately at their disposal. And I see some of the stuff that, some kid who's like 15 makes in freaking Iran or something. And I'm just like, this is incredible work. You know what I mean? Like, This is shocking. And they made it purely based on what they learned on the internet, right? On the fly. And it's like, they have this like, that curiosity is sort of hard baked into them purely because that access to information is so broad. It's just like, and I think part of that I think is what separates children from adults is that children, there is no right or wrong answer, right? And they're not afraid of somebody saying something's trash either, really.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's no consequence there. But that breeds a really interesting dichotomy, though, because you weigh that against adults who find themselves in the creative space and they've committed to that career path, which is a hard one to suck up, and anybody who works in that space will know, like it's one that'll definitely chew people up and spit them out real fast.
Yeah, it's a tough industry.
It's a tough industry, but I think that they also find themselves getting to a point more often than not where they commit to sort of like, oh, I've got this one niche thing in the bag. I'm pretty good at this one thing. I'll just do that one thing, and I just view that as like suicide, honestly.
Yeah, actually, that's that's funny that you bring it up because I've in analogous experience, because I'm 36, so I think our growing up in learning the media stuff is similar. I got my hands on Photoshop in about 5th grade through my mom's workspace. That was when the Infinity Wars comic book was out.
I'm not a comic book nerd, that's
the
good point of reference. But
the Avenger franchise, like where they are, like when that comic book series came out in the 90s, like that was a big deal, and black and white scanners were a thing, and like crossover books in the Marvel universe, and you pick them up at your grocery store.
Yeah.
So what I did is I would go and I would scan the comics in different pages, and like I would take the page where maybe Spider-Man's in a crossover, and then I'd lasso out those frames, and I would try and awkwardly insert them timeline continuity wise within the real book. Just being 5th grade nerdy.
Sure.
But coming up from that space where the access to the knowledge and the tools was scarce compared to now, like I've definitely noticed people my age and older, like publishing is sacred. Like it's hard, and like you're careful about it. Like coming to an idea takes a lot of work, and I watch people in their 20s and younger that are coming into this industry. It's just boom, 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 boom. And through that very different approach, like the work is just as good. It's just a very, very different way of kind of coming around to it. It's really interesting being on two different sides of, so like we're all doing the same shit, but like kind of how the gears work is very different.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said about that kind of boom, 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 out the door production mindset that you were describing, because you look at sort of like the luminaries in like the 3D or design space right now, people like say like a Beeple, like Beeple's famous, and Beeple's our age or older. I don't know how old he is, but he's in his 30s for sure, at least. No offense, Beeple. I mean, I don't know. he's older-ish. He has a kid. He's famous for doing the daily everyday thing, and that he's built an entire career off that, and that's like, that dude does stunning work every day. I'm not saying we should all aspire to be Beeple, but I'm saying is like that model of like adaptation and like kind of like visibility there is something that I think is like more important than I would like to admit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were talking about it earlier with social media, is that like when before Facebook got toxic, I was kind of excited, and it's like, this is fun, this is amazing, I'm reaching out to people. And then you could kind of see like if you were deep in social media, like around 2012, 2013, you started to see like just the emotional relationship was getting more distant, and like it didn't feel like there were. And I drifted out of it. And it's only like really recently I've come back. But yeah, it's like the guys that didn't do that fade out and return, and that just regular discipline of publishing it. You know, Andrew Kramer, for example, and the guys from Grayscale Gorilla are also really great examples of how just that persistent publishing seemed to really pay off.
Sure. I mean, I hate to admit how much truth there is to that, but like literally I was in the car on the way over here and I was listening to NPR and they were talking about a study that they just finished wherein people who took a measured break from Facebook were, you know, and this is kind of speaking more to politics in the case of the study, but they were saying people who took a break from Facebook were less divided, but they were also less informed.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like you could almost take that exact same statement and cut and paste it to, you know, the creative space. Like, and it kind of gave me pause thinking about that, because I was like, shit, like that's kind of where we found ourselves. I don't know how I feel about that. Like it's both cool to know that like you can have an audience. Like, I mean, I'll admit every now and then I'll get like somebody who, an artist I really respect, or like a musician I really respect, who'll like see something I did or something and then they'll like it and I'll be like, oh damn, like that's pretty neat. But I mean, it means nothing, right? It's just somebody pressing a stupid button. But like, I do get a little kick out of that.
I've had that happen too with my Instagram. Every once in a while, somebody who I wouldn't expect would catch wind of like one piece.
Yeah.
And they would give like a little like, it was like, whoa, that's cool, you know? And then, yeah, you're right. It doesn't mean anything, but you still get a thrill from it.
I mean, for me, it's more just like, it's neat to even know that I have the opportunity to have something that lands on somebody else's radar. It's not even that they like something, like, because that doesn't mean anything to me. Like, that's completely inconsequential. It's, hey, I had the opportunity to present something in front of somebody else whose opinion I maybe hold in high regard, right? And that sounds very, I don't know. And then I'm like listening to myself talk, and I'm like, ugh. Like, I kind of almost like want to like puke a little bit, because I'm like, this is so not who I am.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is like, it is a neat reflection of where we are in time that's even a possibility, right?
Well, you know, that's interesting, because I've been, you know, without trying to get into that kind of like smelling your own farts kind of space.
Right.
I've been suspicious that we'll see a higher rise of ego influence in the creative spaces, because, you know, the longevity of millennials in this space is really different from Gen Xers and Boomers, just because of how disruptive things were in the early aughts. And I think social media is amplifying our exposure, whether we like it or not. Like, it feels like we're drifting towards sports in some way, where like personalities, again, I mean, we're talking about names right now, like Beeple and Kramer and all these folks, like, and that makes sense to us in our world, but I think that's becoming more common. I pay a lot of attention on LinkedIn right now, because it's like not shitty Facebook, very similar to Facebook without the screaming politics. And you're starting to see like the people that kind of post regularly, the algorithms favor them, and then you start to get familiar with names and faces, and if they have enough resource to kind of put some production value behind their thoughts, like, it's sticky. It's really sticky. And I mean, I think we've barely begun to see motivated people that have grown up in this that aren't hesitant. Just, you know, I think younger kids are going to be way more personality driven, you know, just by the consequence of it. I mean, it's interesting.
No, it is interesting, and I have a hard time seeing where that like goes, I guess, because I definitely come from a place sort of like in my own philosophy and psychology of just like kind of just resenting social media in general. Like, and I know that sounds at odds with what I've just now said, but like that is really my, like, in my heart of hearts, that's my perception of it. It's just generally negative. And so I really do wonder, looking at a younger generation, like what they'll do with that.
Yeah, I try and soothe some of the grumpiness around social media, and thinking in terms of this is how communities are finding each other, you know, and that's my excuse for all the horrible things that kind of come with it. You know, it's like, yeah, communities are finding each other, and let's ignore the propaganda and the hateful dialogue and the narcissism and the heavy distraction engine it is. There's community.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I get around it. But, you know, what we do is so high performance driven, and what we do is so skills driven, and there's so much thinking strategy behind it, and such a strong relationship with technology. I mean, this is a tough industry to get in, and the people that survive, their names get known whether they like it or not, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually an interesting point that you just touched on there at the end, because, you know, not so much in terms of like content creation, but certainly in terms of like production for like a show, you know, like social media is the business card now.
Yeah.
Like I haven't had a business card in a long time, but you know, I entertained like recently. I was like, well, maybe I'll get a new one cut, and then I realized like no one's actually gonna keep this thing anyway. You know what I mean? It's just like, what's your Instagram handle? What's your this? And it's just like, all right, well, that's where people are spending their time. That's more important, you know.
Well, and that's the thing is that when I was with Left Turn Only, I gave it a business card because it was a way to do the agency brand in addition to the name, so it got to package a little bit tighter. But now that I'm a free agent again, it's totally just like, what's the social media du jour that is going to make sense for you accessing this stuff? And since I've got a handful of things that I produce and keep in my portfolio, like I can put it on Behance, I can put it on Instagram, I can put it on DeviantArt, I can gimmick it up with some motion, put it on Vimeo, like, and then it's just who I'm talking to in that moment. I'm able to kind of gauge and guess, like, oh, you're not a Vimeo person, I'm going to tell you about the Instagram, or, oh, you're like super cool as an artist and you love illustration, maybe I'll send you to my DeviantArt because that's where you have to be. And my only cost for that extra social media profile setup is some time watching cartoons in the evening and uploading, and then copying and pasting things over. So like the lift on being on like 12 platforms is so easy that yeah, I don't need a business card. I don't even really need a strong portfolio. I just point people to their own comfortable place.
See, and that's funny to me because, you know,
Yeah, we're good, man.
in line with the same conversation we were just having about me having this like weird split brain about social media and having a real love-hate relationship with it. You know, like the idea of having like 12 platforms to manage or something just seems like absurd to me.
Oh, I don't talk to people on 12.
No, I mean, I'm sure.
no.
I'm just saying, like, as a matter of fact, and I think that's where that's one of the biggest problems that I have with it is, like, it's so fractured and strange. Like, in some ways, like, I almost wish, you know, for all the pros and positive things I have just said about social media, there's a part of me that really just wishes, like, for this old school era where, like, you just picked up the phone and you called somebody and, like, that was it. And, like, email didn't exist.
Yeah.
But also, by the same token, like, you know, I wouldn't be employed doing what I'm doing now if that didn't exist. So it's like it's a total catch-22 that you...
Well, it's funny because, like, with the phone thing, like, I've been away from doing phone calls long enough, like, I'm kind of comfortable living without telephone calls in my life, but there's a truth to that immediacy that I wish we did still live in a time and a place where the phone wasn't treated as such a horrible interruption from, you know, telemarketers are fucking awful. Like, I don't answer a call I don't recognize.
Yeah.
But I wish I could just call people more immediately without the other person. And I've tried this, you know, because I've consumed sales knowledge where it's like, just call a cold call, just call them. And I do. And like, how they're like, what are you doing? Why are we talking? Like, send me something so I can judge you in my underwear without thinking about you. You know, I mean, that's really what it is, kind of as, you know, and yeah, it's weird. I wish phone calls worked. They don't.
Well, I mean...
At least for me.
Well, I guess I'm saying when I said phone calls, I meant that in the context of, like, an old school era in which that was our only real medium for long-distance communication, right? Mm-hmm. Like, pre-social media, pre-email, pre-internet, really, like... That was the way that it all went down. But, you know, I'm also, in that way, kind of like idolizing a pipe dream in that, like, you know, in that era also, you know, the tools to make the things that I do would not exist. So I'm hoping for a world that doesn't exist anymore in that way, so it's pointless. It is funny what you bring up, though, about the phone call thing. I was thinking about this the other day in the context of, like, all these, like, robocalls you get all the time. I don't know about you, but I get them
all the time.
It is like the most obnoxious thing in the world. And I realized that like the phone is now in the place that like email was in the like mid to late aughts. when like spam email, before like we'd figured out how to actually like regulate email. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where like you would just like your inbox would just be like just fucking nothing but trash. That's basically what the phone has become, which is like a really, really weird evolutionary step that we've arrived at this point. But like I had this epiphany earlier. I was thinking about this and it was like literally like the phone is now exactly that, where you just get like trash things over and over again that are all just scams and cons. Like none of them are actually anything meaningful. Like, they're not even really selling anything half the time. They're just trying to rip you off. You know, and it's really interesting to me that we've arrived at a point wherein that's the next step of like the phone.
Well, and that's what's so funny to me in some ways about social media is because like I'm now really hesitant to even give out my email for fear of just a deluge of bullshit. So it's like I don't really want to give out my phone. I really don't want to give out my email. I still want to work with you, you know. So that's when I default back to like, well, okay, which social media are you the most comfortable with? I'm trying to make sure that I've got at least a modicum of a position there to keep it easy, because it's a filtering barrier. Because if you gum up my social media, I don't really care. Like for example, with Facebook, like I still have stuff on Facebook and I still engage from time to time, but I went to the deliberate effort of literally unfollowing everyone I know. You know, I didn't unfriend them because that gets really weird and soapboxy, but I like when I load up Facebook, I've disengaged so much it throws an error message. Goes, something happened and your content didn't load. We'll get back on it. It's like, yeah, because I fucking deleted everything. But it'll show me like a memory, and then if I try and say I don't want to follow memories, it throws an error at me. You know, like I reduced my engagement as much as possible. But if you wanted to find me personally, you can still find me and a complete profile on Facebook to get a sense of who I am. And if you really do want to reach out further, I just don't fucking care.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have a very measured approach to that. Like, I don't have any pictures of me on Facebook.
Yeah.
Which some people, I think, like, that throws some people for a loop sometimes. I mean, this is wandering, like, way over. We're way lost in social media talk now, but, like, the one that always gets me is, like, the way that we link all these things up now is pretty fascinating. You know, if I get into a lift, it pulls my photo from Facebook. But my photo from Facebook isn't a photo at all. It's this weird animated loop I made. And so, you know, and I've got a pretty weird first name with a weird spelling. And so I think, like, drivers are always, like, the second I get it, it's just like, who am I?
Fuck you, man.
Yeah, like, who am I picking up? Like, what is this person's deal? Like, pretty hard to probably figure out my gender also. So they're just, all right, you know.
Dude, talk about the drift and evolution of technology. I get into a lift, and then they have those little boxes in the front of the car, right? So when they're pulling up from the dashboard, like looking in the windshield, you can see You can see it's the actual like lift car. It has that little light up thing. But when you're sitting in the passenger seat, the back side of it has like a little LED display, and it'll say like, "Hello, Charles. Thanks for riding with us." I'm like, this is like straight out of Fifth Element or some shit.
Oh, I've never noticed
the
that.
The car will say hello back to you just because the tech is synced up, and it can pull the metadata for the name and just put it back out. Like, we can intuitively, like, we can piece together how it happens, and I'm still just like, your little, like, disposable dashboard knows my name. What the fuck future do I live in? But, yeah, so I don't know. Like, you're right, we rambled.
Yeah, that's all right. We went on a weird social media black hole there.
I don't know. We're like 40 minutes in, and we're nearing kind of the end of interesting conversation. What's your website, man? What's the place to, if it's not social media, you know, or whatever it is, where do people, if they listen to this and they want to see some of your work, where would you direct them?
Yeah, so I have a portfolio up right now, but it's like...
Is it the Neon Dope Machine website?
Yeah, that thing is so out of date at this point, though, and like I honestly haven't even signed into
URL. It's such a great URL.
It's such a weird one. So I think the problem is, like, so I have a pretty unique first and last name, and the problem is if I say it to somebody in passing, they'll never get the spelling right, and so...
Dude, I think I fucked up your name for like the first 2 years I knew you.
No, exactly, and that's most people, and that's totally fine. That's the thing is I've accepted that as reality. It's like I own my first name as a domain, but if I just say it to somebody and they don't know me, like they won't get it right. So I landed on that one because I was like, well, maybe I should just adopt some weird moniker to run with for all like my client work or personal stuff. And that one was like a really weird organic one that just happened with my roommate and I on a bus at South by Southwest several years ago, where we were just like, someone was speaking in Spanish rapid fire, and we both just looked at each other like she'd said something. We were like, did she just say Neon Dope Machine? And it was just like, she said something. She obviously didn't say that, but it was just something, and we were like, dude, that would be the greatest name for something. We're like, yeah, we should definitely. So I just stole it from him. I was like, all right, well, that's mine now. I honestly haven't updated this so long. I mean, my reel, like, I look at the reel on there and I just like cringe because I'm like,
I asked Dane in the last episode, what you were, I don't have one. Where's your portfolio? I don't have one.
Yeah,
like, he was just completely offline.
I pretty much need to pull that one down. I would say like Instagram, Cult Magic, KVLT_MAGIK. Is like the better place, and there will actually be like a proper site for that launching pretty quick. I'm working on that right now, which is much more skewing towards like live visual stuff.
Cool. Well, when this publishes, in the description with the credit, I'll put a tag to that in there.
Yeah, just like old portfolio site is just it. Like I'm kind of shocked because I still get people like new referrals, be like, oh, I found you through this, or like somebody point me to this, and I'm just like. I haven't looked at it in so long. Like I just need to pull it down at this point. Honestly, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's still pulling inbound for you, so maybe it's fine. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it doesn't feel like a reflection of where I am, and I don't feel like it reflects. I don't want to say where I am in terms of like, oh, I'm so much more talented, but just like it doesn't reflect the work I'm doing now either. Like the nature of the work that I'm doing now is different, and so I don't feel like it's very, very good at showing that, portraying it.
Right on. Well, I'll, for all two listeners, I'll make sure that your Instagram tag is out there. But
okay.
Caegan, thanks so much for chatting with us here at Sawyer and Company in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, thanks
There's
for having
the
me.
other plug.
There you go, Sawyer.
Cool. I'm gonna hit stop on the recordings.
All right, do it.